That's what it's all about. Look at that, superb ballan wrasse. Makes a break from all them tiddlers from Kent shores where I come from. Come over to Clare for a week's fishing. 2 hours wrasse bassing restores all the frustrations of poor summer. Look at those teeth. Just ideal for crabs, chewing on crabs. Look at them, fearsome. It's a nice, powerful fish. Let's get him back in the water. I've got to take him close to the water, down over the back there. Rush him down and put him in the sea. Here we're at Ballyreen and it's some 25-30 foot up off the water. We're fairly safe. It's very rare for a wave to come right over here. Further down, closer to the water, it is dangerous. Big Atlantic swell like this, it can rise and fall 30 foot. And the old saying about every 7th wave being a big one is a good one to remember. Whatever you do, don't go near the water if there's any kind of swell at all. And if you go down there when it's flat calm, watch your footing and watch the sea all the time. And as I say, we're nice and comfortable up here because we're high and fairly safe, so I haven't got to watch me back too much. Rock fishing, in general, the species that live around rocks, they live from the bottom to the top. There's 2 or 3 different species, so it involves several different types of fishing. And that's what makes it interesting. Another factor that adds to the excitement of rock fishing is the fact that there's plenty of fish. Whereas there's a shortage on some of the sandy beaches, especially in England. In Ireland, there's miles and miles of unfished rock ground. And you get a rucksack, a couple of rods, and you can wander for miles. Over here in Clare, it's got a reputation for big pollock and wrasse. And this, indeed, Ballyreen was seen in the 1950s of one of the only captures of sharks from the shore in Great Britain and Ireland. A guy called Jack Shine landed several porbeagles off a point down there, and with pretty antiquated tackle, cane rods, Alvey side cast reels, all a bit of a, well, really antiquated and old stuff that we wouldn't dream of using now, but it was quite a feat because it's not been repeated. And the British record, for instance, all the qualifying weights of £100 are not going to get bettered. There's just never going to be anybody that's going to catch a shark off the shore. And I'm sure sooner or later, if you sat here long enough, through June, July, August and September, you'd catch a shark. Jack Shine's porbeagles mostly came to lures because what happened was anglers were fishing for mackerel with feathers off the rocks, and a big porgy had come along and grabbed, well, I say a big porgy for the shore, 50 pound up to about 95, grabbed the mackerel off the feathers, and of course all that resulted in he ripped the feathers up and went away. So Jack Shine rigged up some lures, big white lures, and that was his favourite method. Obviously a balloon or something like that, but it's time. I think if I was to come out here and sit here for 4 months, I'd expect to see one. I'm not saying you'd catch one, but I'm definitely positive they still come around here. Anyway, let's get a bit of bait back on and see if we can't catch another wrasse. Right, let's have a look at the tackle. I never use more than 1 hook for rock fishing, simply because less hooks you've got, the less likelihood of losing the gear. Right through the trace, got a 4-ounce lead on the bottom here. A lighter lead is better than a heavy one because the heavy one tends to sink quickly and drops into the rocks and crevices. A light one, you can get it out quickly. I've got just an ordinary straight clip, lead link, then I've got some 20-pound gantail. I just happen to like gantail for this bottom length of line. Main line I've got 45-pound trilene. It's not one of the most popular lines. It was popular a few years ago, but it's one of the most strong, tough line. It stands knocks. Some of these cheap pre-stretched lines, expensive pre-stretched lines, won't take the knocks. They're very low diameter and they just won't stand the abrasions of rocks and limpets and all those sort of things. Hook snood, I've got a swivel and the hook snood comes off that, and that's 30-pound Maxima. Now, The outfit altogether, obviously this light line on the bottom is expected if I do get the lead snag to snap first, giving me a stronger link with the fish. But you are going to lose gear because this gets rubbed by the rocks, and occasionally they'll break off. So just make up another rig when you want it. That's what I do. I've got all the gear here to make one up as I go along. Right, the bait we got on there is a bit of peeler crab, and that hook, it's a classic Viking shape. And the good thing about it, it's chemically etched, so it's a little bit sharper, or say quite a lot sharper than the ordinary hooks. Right, now crab as bait for wrasse, yeah, it's the favourite bait for the bigger wrasse. There's no doubt about that. You can catch wrasse on lugworm, you can catch wrasse on ragworm, anything more or less, except fish. They don't very often take fish. But one of the problems is, with a crab, often I use just a small hardback crab. I've got peeler crabs here. I like using peelers because I can tie them to the hook so they stay on there. If you use an ordinary hardback crab, this is a peeler, but we'll look at it as a hardback crab. That's about the biggest size you want. The way to fish for wrasse is just to hook them through the underneath, like that. Now the wrasse, we're talking big wrasse here, 3-4 pounders. The small ones tend to nibble, bite the legs off, bite chunks out, but the big one will take the whole lot. The only thing with it is, once a fish has attacked it, usually if you haven't hooked him on that first couple of bites, he's gone and he's ripped all the bait off. So I tend to fish with a half of a bit bigger crab, peeled. Here's one I've done earlier. Hook it through, and a little bit of knitting elastic around it. You don't have to be too fussy, just whip it on there so that the crab stays on. Yeah, he's having a go. This is where you've got to be careful lifting them. You can soon break your rod tip if you bring them up and put the rod straight up. So you don't want to bring it up any higher than about that. Swing it in, grab the line, away. It's only a small fish, a couple of pound, but we've got to clean out the small ones before we get the big ones. This usual story. A couple of months ago, we had the World Rock Championship on this patch of rocks, and the best wrasse came out was 5'8". Not a big wrasse by Irish standards, they go up much bigger than that, but it's quite a job to get them up on anything but beach casting gear. Right, I'll rush him back pretty quick. It's a lovely fish, lovely bronze colour. You've got to keep hold of them, else they'll jump and damage themselves, so I've got to keep a good hold of them. Yeah, you can see a lovely colour. Big fins, they're quite powerful, and they do get in them rocks. And see that pointed mouth and those teeth? They get right in the crevice and grab limpets and crabs, so they can get a bait that's anywhere. Right, I'll put him back in the water. Got a nice, this Abu, it's an 8,000. It's just the right reel for rock fishing for wrasse. Not going to fast retrieve, but it's a strong, solid reel. And that's just what you want for this lark. Right, on the bottom, engage the reel, and we're ready for a bite. I can just imagine that big wrasse down there waiting to chew that bait up. Yeah, it's there straight away. It's those small ones picking it about. He's on the ledge. Oh, he's a nice one, nice bright one. A bit bigger this one, so I'll watch the tip of the rod now and line him up. Oh, he's not a monster. It's a nice fish. Again, that 2.5 pound. They're solid fish and they weigh heavy. Oh, and he bit me then. Got to be careful of those teeth. They've got quite a grip. Right, let's take the hook out and we'll catch another one. We'll put him back in the pool. I think what I'll do, I've had enough wrasse now. We'll try for a pollock in a minute. So I'll let him go and we'll try for a pollock. Now, there's 2 or 3 ways of catching pollock off the rocks, but one of the favourite, got to be the favourite, is to catch them with a red gill. Pollock are suckers for red gill, or so they tell me. I've had some of my biggest ones in Clare, up to about £8 on red gills. The red gill was invented a few years ago. All it is a rubber imitation sand eel. Now, they come in various colours, but because the original one was called a red gill, that's the name we call them. So we're using a bluegill in fact this time. But off the rocks in Clare, green and blue are favourite. The natural one sometimes works, and a bright orange one. There are a few day glow colours around, but I prefer the blue or the green, especially for the big pollock. Now, the rig, I've got a Paul Carey high performance match rod, which is soft enough to give you a bit of fun with a couple of pound pollock. A Daiwa HT, 7HT, and it's got 15 pound line straight through. I've got a 2.5 ounce bomb, and here we've got a straight lead link with a short trace off to the red gill. I suppose what's that, 6 foot. Now, sometimes when the pollock are timid, you might want a longer one. Other times I've seen anglers be successful with a 3 foot trace. Pollock are just not put off by the lead going through the water in front of the red gill. Now, bass would be, and quite a lot of other fish do, but the pollock don't seem to mind. So you can get away with about a 6 foot trace. Now, obviously, casting the trace off of the rocks with a long trace, you've got to be careful you don't hook it up in the rocks behind you. I saw a chap do that a few years ago, and the gill hooked up, the line broke, and the lead come back and hit him in the head. So what I do, there's 2 or 3 ways of doing it, but some anglers put a panel pin in the lead and just hang the gill on the panel pin. All I do is just nip the point of the hook in the lead so that it hangs. That way it'll come off when it hits the water or after you've cast. Right, now the pollock swim fairly close to the edge of the kelp. You can get them right in, but usually it's underneath the rocks or just 30 foot out at most, not right out. So what I'll do, I'll move out onto this rocky promontory here so I can cast along the rocks. Obviously, with this kind of fishing, mind where you go, Alan, with this kind of fishing, you couldn't do it if you had someone upstream, or similarly downstream. There's anglers down there, so I would cast up here. Now, it's simply a matter, you don't have to cast a long way, just a lob. Let it sink. Say it's about 30 foot. Now the bottom is kelpy, so you've got to be careful. And there is, as I said before in the wrasse fishing, a certain feel that you get. Now while I'm talking to you, I'm going to get hooked up. But anyway, I've got to concentrate on reeling in. You don't have to jerk or lift the rod up and down, sink and draw like you do with mackerel. You just continually reel at a set speed. If you don't get any results with, say, that speed, slow it down. I find that's about right. Now the pollock will follow it, nibble it, and if they're hungry, they just snap it. And the initial dive they give you, they go straight to the bottom. I don't really believe there's another fish that is so powerful, apart from the coalfish, as the pollock on its initial dive. Now you can spin with a bit lighter gear, fixed ball reels, spinning rod, but over here in Clare, you're likely to get a 5 or 6 pound pollock, and that's going to test 5 pound line. Right, we've come right into the edge. So I prefer to stick to 15, at least 12. Right, there we are. It came off all right, you see. That's what we do. Hook the gill again. After a while, you get a little hole there, and it really starts to work well then. Now this time I'll let it get to the bottom and come back a little bit slower. Is there a pollock at home? No, you get, as it touches the bottom, the trick is to strike every time. Yes. Yes. Whoa, let the clutch off a bit. Right, now I've got to lift this one. I've only got a 2.0 on there, and it's an Aberdeen Blue, so I've got to be very careful. There we come. Careful. Oh yeah, cracking pollock, that one. Not a monster. Couple of pound, 2.5 pound. They like those blue red gills. Look at that, right in the front of the mouth. He's obviously chasing that wiggly tail. Let's get the hook out. As you can see, they've got a great big mouth. They chase whitebait all the time, that's what they feed on. They also scavenge on lumps of mackerel and crab and anything that's lying around, but they're primarily a mid-water fish, mid-water and bottom fish, and they charge around chasing the shoals of whitebait. The trouble with them is, when you catch them on a high rock point like this, if you drop them, they damage. So you've got to be very careful. Get a good grip with them. You can see the big eyes. Sight's their main. They target into the sight. They've also got the lateral line. They can obviously feel the vibrations, but they see what they're going to eat first. That's why they're so fussy about the colours. Right, I'll get him in before he does any damage. This style of reeling in, I copied this off of Mick Toomer. He's a boat angler. I criticised him because I thought it looked cack-handed. But for this kind of fishing, it's just ideal. You've got the reel right in front of you. This way, when I'm under pressure and got fish to pull in, when I want to put some pressure on the fish. But this way, you can really feel the lure working, and you're in complete control because you can give it a quick strike. We're getting near to the hot spot again. Tell you what, I reckon I could get a float down there. We'll try in a minute. We'll try a float right behind the back of that ridge. There it is, right there. No takers? Not this time. No, I think I'll give the float rod a go. We can float fish, both the pollock and wrasse. Now for this float rig, I've got a much lighter outfit. Got a fixed spool reel, got a Mitchell Match freshwater reel, but it's just right. 12-pound line. I wouldn't fish with much lighter on the rocks because of the damage to the line. You can get away with 6-pound, but the line get damaged quickly. The rod, this one's a Daiwa sea bass. Not an ultra light rod, but it's just ideal. It's strong enough to be able to pull a fish up the rocks, because if you use a very light spinning rod, you've got it doubled over. Okay, you're going to get a net, but the swell's so bad that it's job to get a fish in the net off rocks like this. Right, the actual outfit we've got a sliding float. All I've got is a short trace. I've got on the hook, that's a size 1 camisand. Now I've got that on there because I've got some small sand eels I want to try, but I'd possibly go up to a 2 or 3.0 for a crab bait or for a big fish bait. Trace, we've got a swivel, a little bomb just to give it enough weight to go down. You can use a barrel lead or a coffin lead. I've got no preference, but that bomb does the job. The float, you want quite a substantial float. It's no use using anything too small because the pollock will take it under and it's gone, and it'll go straight down and bury into the kelp before you know it. So on occasion we use really big floats in Clare when we're match fishing, a bullcock. You might laugh, but they really work. And Timmy Fagg from Kent won the World Rock Championship last year using a bullcock, and it really works. What we do, this one is sliding. We've got the lead fixed there so it doesn't slide up, makes it easier for casting. And then on the line, we've got a power gum stop knot. You can see that? I've got 2 stop knots there, one locked against the other, just for a bit of extra security. Now, the power gum, I mentioned it earlier, it's got lots of uses, and this is one of them. It's soft, it'll go through the rings, but it will stop when it comes to the float. If you use monofilament, that can sometimes jam in the ring, and I've actually seen people jam it in the ring and break the line. But the old power gum, multi-uses, that'll go through the ring easy. This way you can fish any depth you like, and all you need to do to reduce your depth is just move your stop knot up the line. Now, the other advantage of using power gum is that it doesn't damage monofilament. If you use monofilament and tie it tightly, it will damage the line. So we're fishing at about, let's see, I would say 12 foot there. That should be okay. Right, for a pollock, let's try for a pollock first. I've got some sand eels. Keep well in a food flask. They've got all sorts of uses. We can use them for dogfish on the bottom, but pollock love them as well. Got various sizes. See, they're still frozen. They've been there like that for quite a time now. Pick one out. These are ammo ones, and frozen ammo, Starmers, most of them are pretty good. As long as you keep them from thawing out. If you can keep them frozen, when you take them home from the shop, go to the shop with a thermos flask or a cool box or something like that, and take them home, put them in the fridge. So you keep them frozen, because once they thaw out, they get soft and redheads, and they just burst when you put them on the hook. Now, when you take them out the thermos flask, timing's crucial because they thaw pretty quick. The trick is to get them on the hook without damaging them too much. So we just thread this one on. There's various ways of putting them on. You can put the hook right through the eel so that the point comes out the tail, or I prefer just to nick it in the head like that. It hangs like that with the hook coming out just behind the gill. Better check the bait. They soon chew the tails off these sand eels. No, it looks okay. Yeah, it's a bit damaged. We'll put another one on there and try again. Bit of ground bait. Now, failing that, what we'll do, we'll see if the wrasse is still in residence. We'll put a bit of crab on. Nice juicy bit of crab. As I say, you don't need to be. It's quite fun watching the float go under when you've got a wrasse on it. Not too fussy about moving the shell. We've left the wrasse alone for a bit, so perhaps we'll catch another one of those. Right, we're right alongside the rocks now. We're right on the edge. Yeah, something out to go at that float. It's away. I've got this clutch set very light because they don't half go. Cool. It's another pollock, I reckon. Well, would you believe it's a wrasse this time? Oh, that's not a bad one either. Might have a job to get it up on this line. Definitely have to hand line it. Easy does it. Careful. This is where you fall in and get overexcited. I get excited about any fish. Don't matter how big it is. I like tiddlers as well. Look at that. Yeah, it's a lovely wrasse. Yes. Ooh. Not a monster, but on 12-pound line and a bass rod, quite capable of giving you a bit of sport. Right, we'll take that hook out and get him back. Right, he's gone back okay. Well, we've had a nice day, caught a lot of wrasse and pollock. Not monsters. There are some monsters in Ireland to catch. We've had average sized fish, I suppose, but that's what sea fishing's about most of the time. It's not always about record breakers. There's plenty of small fish too, and you can have some good fun with them. Well, while I'm packing up, I'll just square this gear away. We'll go through a few points for the day. Right, first of all, I can't overemphasise the safety aspect of fishing off rocks. It's advisable always to fish in pairs and let everybody know where you are. Good footwear. Pumps, as I said, are all right. They give you a good firm grip and you're not really going to slip over. You've got to have awareness of the sea. The sea is very dangerous. These big waves can knock you flat, and the best swimmer in the world is not going to get out in that kind of swell. He's going to be battered up against the rocks and drown. So always be aware of the safety aspect. Roving is the best way to fish the rocks. A rucksack like this one, it's a Titan one. They make some good gear for rovers. Nice and stout, you can get plenty of gear in it. Matter of fact, what I do, just a little tip there, is I put a Tupperware box in the bottom. It stops the bottom of the rucksack wearing. Anyway, so you've got a rucksack, a rod. I mean, you can get away with one rod, but of course one rod won't do all the jobs. You want a couple of three. So I've given you a good idea today of what to carry. You can either carry a light spinning rod like this one, this bass rod, even lighter if you want to go light, or a middle of the range beach caster like this Paul Carey match one with a Red Gill on, or a pretty stout rod like this Abu, and the 45-pound line for the wrasse and the congers. Of course, you could fish for congers. And last of all, we've got this outfit here. We haven't managed to fish with this today. This is just for casting off the rocks. I've had so much fun catching wrasse and pollock that I never did get to go and catch a silly dogfish. But anyway, that's just basic beach gear with slightly heavier line and a fast retriever. Now the setup I'm going to use today, as you can see, I've got a butt caster. That's the reel at the bottom. I've got a Ziplex 2500. It's an 8'6" tip and a 5' butt. The reel, it's an Abu 6.5 ultra cast, and it's got a CT frame. That's a conversion frame on it. The basic reel that we use, straight out of the box, comes with a level line there. That moves backwards and forwards, and you can see it restricts the reel line. We've also got a top bar on the top of the reel. Now that means when we're casting, we can't get our thumb right over the bar. The tendency is to lock your thumb under the bar, and it's quite painful if it happens. With the frame conversion, you can see we can get the thumb right over and really grip the spool, which means greater distance cast because you can simply put more pressure on the spool. The frame itself you can get complete for the 6.5. Now a lot of the other makes and multipliers, you can get conversion kits, would involve cutting the top bar out. Now that's done with a hacksaw. Now it's not the sort of thing you want to do to your best favourite multiplier you just paid £100 for, unless you're sure you know what you're doing. So one way to do it is to take it to a dealer and get a professional to do it, or buy an Abu and use the frame. Now line, I've got 15-pound main line, and I've got a leader, 60-pound leader. This one I've got here is a new one from Daiwa. It's a tapered leader, which means that I haven't got a bulky leader knot joined to the main line. I've got 60-pound at the beginning, it tapers down right down the bottom to 15-pound, and that gives me a nice neat knot. Because when you're casting, if you do happen to catch your thumb on the knot, a big bulky leader knot can rip your thumb apart. So those small knots are ideal. What you do when you're fishing, you make sure the leader knot is away from the side of the reel that you're thumbing. So in my case, I thumbed that side, so I reel in and put the leader knot there. Anyway, we'll rig up, put the line through the rings. I've got a QF swivel on here, I'll explain it later, but it helps to thread the line through the rings. If you've just got an end of line, quite often you drop it. With this you can get your thumb right hold it. And today, well, we've got a force 8 gale straight in our face, and we're going to have some fun, I think. Anyway, we'll thread the rings up. Tip of this rod, you can see I've got some fluorescent tape. Nice and handy to see at night, reflective tape. You can use white paint, emulsion, anything like that. Right, now the rig. I'll put a lead lift, I'll put a plain lead on this one to start. We've got easy links on the bottom. They're not quite as easy as they're made out, because for some reason Mustard are making them now with a bent wire. They were originally straight, and they're hard on your thumbnail. You wear your thumbnail out with them. Anyway, an easy link, a Berkeley swivels. There's a lot of danger in a break off during casting, so you want good quality swivels, and the same goes to the line. The trace body is a continuation of the leader line. I personally don't like traces made from bright orange line, although I don't really think there's that much in it as far as putting the fish off. But I use one make of line for my traces, and that's Gantel. It's quite popular amongst the match anglers. It's quite a good quality line. Now that's £60, and you must remember to continue the strain of your trace from your leader through your trace. It's no good having a £50 leader and then a £30 trace, because the trace will snap under casting pressure. We come up from the lead link, the swivel, and we've got this contraption here. Now this is a bait clip. This one's one of Paul Kerry's bait clips. It's a manufactured one that you can buy, fairly easy to put on. All you do is put it on the line. It's like a hook that goes through a rubber sleeve, slides up and down the line. The way it works, if we can get this tangle undone, is the hooked with the bait on, goes on the clip like that. And when it's tensioned, it hangs like that. Now, the fact that the bait is close to the line and just behind the lead makes the setup much more streamlined. So distance is improved. I would say about 30% more distance. In a situation like this where we've got a lot of wind, this is quite a useful setup. Bait clips though do become a disease amongst sea anglers, because they come distance conscious and they use bait clips all the time, and that's not advisable. There are a lot of times when fishing without a bait clips can be a definite advantage. Up further, we've got the nitty-gritty of the trace. Now, what I've got here, and there are lots of variations on this theme, is I've got the main line going through 2 beads. Now you can see the beads, and they trap the swivel, and then either side of the beads I've got a stop knot. Now there is a tendency to make up rigs with a knot in the trace. Now this is very dangerous because it weakens the length of the main line on the trace. So never put a knot in the middle of that trace, because £60 line quickly becomes 30. Up the top of the trace we've got the other half of that QF swivel. Now these, from a match fishing point of view, are most useful because we can change traces very quickly. All they do is slot in together, and there's a little collar around the top and a rubber sleeve that keeps it in position. Now they won't come undone. I've heard a lot of sea anglers say, oh, I've had one come undone, but these made by Dexter's, they are now improved with this collar. Originally they didn't have the collar and they did come undone occasionally, but these will not come undone. I've fished with them for 2 years now and never lost a trace. And the advantage is, of course, if you're in a match situation, you can quickly take one trace off and get another one and put that on. So you can pre-bait another trace while you're fishing and change traces when you reel in. That technique is most useful when you're freelance fishing, as I am here, as you'll see throughout the day. If you've got a hooked fish, for instance, an eel in a tangle, you don't want to sit down and waste time untangling the eel. You can put the eel to one side, you can put another trace on, you can cast out. Now, it also means that you can bait up
at your leisure. No rushing around, put bait on while you've got, because you want to get a bait tackle back in the sea. You can take your time and the presentation is therefore perfect.
Right, now to the casting. What we can do a pendulum cast. Now, we've got strong wind and it's raining quite hard. So we want a low flat cast at the sea. We're quite high up here over these rocks. If we do a long drop pendulum cast, that's a full bore pendulum cast up in the air, we're going to get our weight and our line back in our face. Now, in a tournament field with the wind behind, you can put your lead up high in the sky and the wind will take it. Most practical fishing conditions are not like that. We've got uneven ground to stand on, rocks, that sort of thing, and we've got wind in various directions, side or front, are difficult winds to cast in. So basically what we've got to do, what I use an adapted pendulum cast. I call it a stubby pendulum cast if you like. Now the basic setup is thumb on the reel, wrap round the spool, gives you a good grip. Hand up the rod, firm grip. Don't want your arm stretched and you don't want it bent. Slightly crooked, shall we say. Now the swing, we've got to drop from the rod tip to the lead weight about the length down to the tip ring, to the butt ring. Remembering the more force that you put in the cast, the longer drop, the further it'll go, but there is a tendency, if you use a long drop, to go high in the sky. So we'll shorten our drop a little bit to combat that wind and push the weight out flat. Now a pendulum cast, a full bore pendulum cast, is a lot more involved than just a 360-degree swing. It's too complicated to spend time here on, but what I can do is show you my basic little stubby pendulum cast which I use for practical fishing. All it is out, back and round. Now I did it nice and gently there to show you. Obviously the more force involved, the further it goes. Now, footwork, a lot of people might tell you you've got to stand exactly like this or you've got to do that. That's not the way to cast. The way to cast is to feel comfortable. My feet stand like that. Now when you swivel round, you don't want to be standing like this so you're all twisted and off balance. So make yourself comfortable. If it's a rocky bottom or an uneven slope, move around, dig your feet in, get really comfortable before you start. Where you put your feet doesn't really matter as long as you are feeling comfortable. The actual cast has got to be smooth, one action. If you jerk, then that's when your trouble with overruns happen. Now you can doctor your reels up, you can put brake blocks in to slow down, you can adjust the tension on the spool to tighten up. One of the basic improvements you can make to your casting is not to load the reel too much line. Now in a tournament condition, a caster would have 350 yards plus on his reel because he wants to cast 200 odd yards, so he's got to have a lot of line, bearing in mind that line goes up in a bow, so it's actually more line out than the distance cast. Now by only putting about 150 yards on a 6,000 havu like that, you're going to get a cast that goes out straight and true without a fluff, because there's not enough line behind the lead to overrun. The lead is simply taking all the line off. Now for youngsters, juniors particularly, 100 yards of line, you cast it all out. You won't get bird's nest. Tighten the spool down slightly. Remember, if you're starting casting and if you're pendulum casting, you're not going to be able to do 250 yards straight away. So start on the bottom rung of the ladder and work up. 100 yards, then put 120 yards on your reel, then 150, and that way you'll learn. It took me a long time to learn to cast. As for the reel up the butt or the reel down, practically for fishing nowadays, I find that the reel down the butt is a lot better. Less power, it's a slower cast, a gradual cast. The lead goes in a wider arc, therefore you don't shake the bait off, and there's room for mistakes. If you're in a hurry, then the slow arc will allow you to make mistakes. The short up the butt pendulum cast, which I did for years, the timing's got to be perfect and you can make mistakes. Right, now we'll get to some fishing. Oh, we've got a bite now, I think. Yeah, there's something there. Very tentative eels, they pick it up and play with it, small ones do. You've got to let them have a bit of time, it's no good striking them straight away. That's better. Yes.
coming slack. Did I get him? That's the question. Yeah, there's something on here. Small fish. Clutch is not going to run, of course. Might have to get something huge. This one's a fair way out. Oh yeah, he's pulling now. It's an eel, I think. Got to keep it up because of the rocks below. Real fairly fast. It's getting close now. Yeah, it's an eel. It's a small eel. See him on the top now. Oh, he's away! He's off! Ah! Well, that happens sometimes. Look at that. It's spun up. Whether the line's damaged or not. We get that rod back in the water. Looks like they're coming through at the moment. It up, hooking themselves and dropping slack. That's a better fish. Let's see if we can get it in this time. One of the problems is I'm reeling in fairly fast, so you're putting a lot of pressure on the hook. And that last one, the hook link went. Yep, it's not a big fish. This one was a long way out. I'm going to get it in. Got to be careful of these rocks down here. I don't want to fall down there. Got to be careful when I get a fish close to the rock to get them up over. Right, it's a flatty, this one. He's been down. Here he comes. Oh, not a bad one either. Flounder or place? Flounder, I think. Here he comes. Yeah, not a bad flounder at all. Oh yes, nice one. Nice one. About £1.5, £1.75. Swallow the bait, which is what flounders always do. Lovely fish. Nice condition. Underneath. Right, what I'll do, I'll snip the line. So I'm taking the hook out now. Put him in the bucket with some water. Let him revive a bit and we'll put him back. I'm not going to keep him. But he can make a nice fish to eat. You get some nice fillets like that if you like flounder. In you go, fella. Let's get them two dry rods baited up. This advantage of double patting. I'll swap that rig there. The old QF and away we go. This one out of the way, let's get him out. Now that flounder comes from a fair long way out, so I think I'll whack this one. Get it out of ways a bit. Right. Steady boy, not too excited, that's your snap off. Here we go. That's just right. Call that rain now's bad. Get a bit of a bow, get the baits on the bottom. That's one. Now bait the other one up. Bit of bait left on there, bit of ragworm. Want a bit of crab on there, a bit of peeler crab. There we go. We'll get that eel. Nice small crab. Now this one, that wind's a problem, so I better cast it a little bit away from the first one, otherwise I'll get them tangled up. In short, this one. Without the swing, I'm just going to cast this one short, so it's a lob. Nice and smooth, and we're in. Cool, it's coming down stair rods now, really raining hard. Fish don't mind though, they're already in the water. There's a little touch there. Yes. That time we had an eel. No, I don't know. Yes. Yes, there's something there, small. Tuck the old rod in the hip, then I'll help to reel in. Yes, he's on there. Support the reel with your arm as well, that helps. Yes, there's something there. I don't think it's very big, but it's a small fish of some kind. He went in them rocks, but he's out. We got him. Oh, it's an eel. Got a big lump of weed on the line. Yeah, limey about £1.25. Not a bad one. Put him in the bucket. They're lovely fish, really. A lot of people don't like them because they tangle up your line. The bigger ones are not so bad. Now, when you're handling an eel, always have a small bit of rag, because if you have a big towel like that to keep your hands dry, it gets covered in slime. It's always, I'll have a slime rag, a flannel usually. These big eels, they're not too much trouble to hold. Two ways of holding them. If you've got a rag, it's alright, but if you haven't got a rag, then fingers like that. Gets a good grip of an eel. Between your fingers like that. You really can grip them. Of course, there's the old trick of lying them on their back. We do that sometimes. They're supposed to stay still. Let's try it. See what happens. No, you don't want to. Anyway, we'll get him in the bucket and get another one. Tackle off again. Right, bait up another rig. Yep, it's not a big fish, but it's an eel, it's a flounder. One of the two. There he coming, that's a flounder. Got a big lump of weed on his nose too. Now I've got to get him over them rocks. Hooked up in the bottom. I'm going to have to go down the bottom. Mind your step where you got down here. Yeah, mind your step down here. That's the trouble with fishing far back on this tide, with this tide drop back. Fish are out there at the moment, so I want to make the most of it. Right, here he is. Not a bad sized flounder. Yeah, it's about stock sized flounder, about 12 ounces. Peeler crab again, of course. Big half. That dark colour. Been foraging in amongst the weed in the rack for crabs. Right, we'll take him off, put him in the bucket to recuperate. Get the lid off. Put him back in a minute. Wipe my hands. Oh, it made me puff going down there. I must be out of condition. Oh, it's a little bass. I've got it out of the water. I don't want to drag it all over the rocks. So what I'll do, I'll put the rod down and go down there. These bass, down in Hampshire, they call them checkers. We call them schoolies in Kent. He's only about 4 ounces. Tiny little thing. I'd like to see him go back alive. We've had enough trouble with bass, trying to protect them from gill nets and what have you. Oh, there you go, Alan. Don't hurry. Right, here he is. Dear little thing. Oh, he's hooked. Not too bad. There we are. Now that one day could grow into a British record if we get him back in the water quick. 19 pound, and it's held by David Bourne, and he caught it in my hometown of Dover in Kent. That's the record. Now it takes about 25 years for that fish to reach that size. They're very slow growing species, but as you can see, he's a perfect little spiky fins. Now as a tip for anybody who's a bit frightened of bass, they've got a very sharp gill cover and the sharp spiky fin. Now I'm used to handling them, so I know exactly where they're sharp, but a good idea if you get a bass is to hold it by the mouth. Anything like that, little blennies or anything. They're not going to bite you very hard, much less than one of those, which the gill cover or the spike can draw blood quite easily. You can see that's very, very sharp. Anyway, we'll get him back in the sea. There he goes. That's our good deed for the day. Right, we'll get this tackle up, back up the top. Good old QF swivel. Save me looping that line all up and getting it tangled in the rocks. I'll take the trace, go up and then pull the line up afterwards. Right. Well, that's a bass. I would have liked to have caught a bigger one, but I'm afraid present day conditions, daylight angling makes catching a decent bass very difficult. And in Hampshire, here in Langstone Harbour, the place is full of little checkers. Sometimes you can't fish because they keep getting on the hook and you don't want to kill too many. So we're stuck with eels and flounders. But a night session, perhaps on a hailing front, you might get a decent bass. But he's definitely the fish that you've got to turn to darkness nowadays to get. Not had a bite for a few minutes now. Fish seems to have gone off, and what we have had have been small. I think it's time to give it best. I've got a bit wet and a bit winded now. I've blown about a bit, and the weather's closing in even more now. Before we go, I'll recap over what we've done during the day. Now, this kind of fishing for flounders and eels, a place like Langstone Harbour, it's not as exciting as fishing for big bass and things or cod in the winter, but it keeps you fishing during the summer. Plenty of action, lots of bites, and quite a bit of fun involved in what you're actually going to catch. Flounders and eels, they're not commercially sought, so there are plenty of them about in most of the estuaries and around the coast. The flounders probably perhaps the sea's most prolific fish around Britain. It's like the blackbird in the country. Everywhere you go, there's a blackbird. In the sea, everywhere you go, there's a flounder. Right, we've had, as you can see, the layout today. I've got my gear pretty tight under the brolly, mainly to keep the stuff dry. I don't like it getting wet, but it does pay to keep your gear together. Don't leave traces lying around. They get tangled around your feet and trip you up, and you can forget them and leave one behind on the beach, and you know what that can do. Bait wise, it's important. That's one thing we must keep on about the bait. Now, fresh bait is better than stale bait, obviously, but frozen bait is next to useless. If you go and collect your own, you've got the best. Go and get your ragworm yourself. It's easy to dig. You get 3 a spit around this area. Crabs the same. They're not available all the year round locally, but when the eels and the flounders are in, they're in. That's what the flounders and the eels are after. Ragworms not so fussy. They'll keep for a week. You can keep them in the fridge if you're not going to use them straight away in a bit of weed or some wet newspaper. Recap on tackle. Basically, the outfit I've used, you've seen today, is we call it a paternoster. It's hooks on snoods running off a main line. Very simple. There's no need for long, elaborate traces. Okay, as a matchman, I use booms sometimes and a variation on a trace, but most of the time, and this applies to a lot of fishing, a straight, simple paternoster rig is the best. It's most efficient, it's most aerodynamic for casting, it doesn't tangle, and that's one of the things. You make up a rig, you make it up on dry land, and it doesn't tangle. You think perfect, but when it gets in the sea, it's a different environment, and in the sea it might tangle. So basically you want the hooks so that they can't meet each other or tangle around the main body of the line. Another thing with the traces is the strength of the line you make the trace. Don't go too light on your snoods. There is a tendency in summer to go to 15-pound line in your snoods. There's no real need for that. In fact, it can be a hindrance because 15-pound tangles much easier than 25 or 26. For eel fishing, I go even as high as 30. Hang on a minute, there's a touch there. Small bite, something small. Something on there. Oh, look at that. Little eel. 2 little eels. Little slimies are coming through now. It's time to go home. Oh, they've dropped in behind that rock down the bottom there. I'll have to go down. Little eels. Definitely time to go home. They've come through on a shoal of them have come through, obviously. A bit too small to be bothered with. They usually tangle you right up. Behind the rock there. one's come off. I thought I saw two. Look at that little tiny thing. Ah, little tiny thing. There we are. We'll let him go. Oh, he's gone. Right. Well, we've had a good day. Weather's not been too good. I'm a bit wet all over. But I hope you've enjoyed it. We've had a few fish, we've had a few flounder, one nice flounder, a few eels. It's been a good day. I hope to see you again sometime.